Oh ho, it's that time again! More inaccuracies, yes. I mean, you've been here for the last 3 weeks, probably. And if you haven't, welcome! You should like and subscribe. I shouldn't ask that at the beginning, though. Because then you'll be like, oh, this guy's cringe. I'm leaving now. And if you did, I hope you have a good day. Anyway, so... today we're going to discuss the new dinosaurs from Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Now, Fallen Kingdom is probably the first, outside of 3, probably the first, Jurassic Park movie that was very, very divisive, or, is divisive even a word? Polarizing. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Some people defend it, some people don't like it at all. A lot of people weren't really fond of it. I don't hate it too much. I think it's overhated. I don't think it's that bad. But it's definitely weaker than World. That I definitely will say. It is a weaker movie overall than World. It does have its moments. I think its big issue is that it's a lot of setup with no real payoff. So, yeah. But the benefit for me, at least in terms of this list, is that there were way more new dinosaurs added in Fallen Kingdom than compared to the original Jurassic World, which, as you probably remember, I only had 3 new species to go over there, and this time there's 5. So, hey, that's good. That's good. We like new species being on the big screen. But naturally, with new species, they're gonna screw something up. It's Jurassic Park. They can never be 100% historically accurate, and that's okay, because it's, again, science fiction, but still, I'm gonna point them out. Also, same rules apply. No repeats, because that would be silly. And I'm not talking about the freaking hybrid, because Fallen Kingdom had a new hybrid in form of the Indoraptor, which was pretty scary, pretty intense. I liked the portrayal, but not a real animal, even within the canon. So yeah, not something we're even gonna remotely discuss because there's nothing to compare it to. But here are the Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom dinosaurs, rated from least to most accurate. Baryonyx. Fun fact! Baryonyx was actually originally supposed to be the main villain dinosaur for Jurassic Park 3, but Jack Horner suggested the Spinosaurus because, well, they were bigger and would have been more impressive. And I don't think in retrospect that was a bad call. You know, it made sense. But in Fallen Kingdom, they finally felt the need to give us a Baryonyx. And boy, howdy did they screw it up. It is... Yeah, it's, I think the most frustrating part for me, about the Fallen Kingdom Baryonyx is that it's so subtle. All of the issues are so subtle that most people wouldn't know what the problems are. But there's a lot of them. Like, a lot of them. And they stack up. This animal, as it's portrayed, really isn't a Baryonyx. You know, you may think it is, but it ain't. For example, the clones have a crocodilian-like armored back and underbelly, which there's no basis for in the fossil record at all. Now, I know that Spinosaurids, which Baryonyxes are known for being fairly crocodile-like due to their snouts, but there's no data that suggests that they were armored in that manner. Speaking of the snout, while it is long enough to be a Baryonyx snout, it's very broad, and it has a much less pronounced notch in the upper jaw. They also don't have the triangular crest on the top of their nasal bones, which is a weird omission for me because, like, wouldn't that make them look cooler? Like, it's literally there. It's part of the actual animal. Why would you leave that off? They have pronated wrists, because of course they do. Of course they have the pronated wrists. I don't know what you expected. And the fingers aren't even accurate. The second and third fingers, as well as their claws, are longer. And their teeth are wrong, too. They're a lot straighter. So yeah, there's a lot of things that just aren't right about this. They made for a pretty intense scene, sure, but yeah, I just kind of annoyed with how much they got wrong about the animal. They could have made it a lot more accurate and it would have been just as scary. I mean, with the crest, it would have almost been cooler, right? Like, what's the deal? Oh, yeah, and maybe this is really obvious, but just to be clear, I don't think a real Baryonyx would be able to tolerate getting hit with molten lava quite as well as this one did. I just really need to throw that out there. I know that may not be something I had to point out, but yeah, that likely was not a thing they could have handled nearly that well. Carnotaurus. This is one that fans have been waiting for, as it is a very popular species of dinosaur due to their horns, and it actually already exists in the series before this movie. They were in The Lost World, the novel. Really? No, seriously, they're there. 2 of them, in fact. Though they had a very different portrayal in the book. Michael Crichton actually gave them a camouflage ability, allowing them to change the colors on their skin in order to blend into the background, which made for a pretty horrifying scene, but probably has no basis in the fossil record whatsoever. But hey, much like the venom in the Dilophosaurs, that was another thing that added to the horror, and made it clear that there's a lot we just don't know about these animals. Could they have done that? I mean, I suppose it's not impossible, but yeah, no basis for it. But we're talking about the portrayal in this movie, which is a lot different. For one thing, there's no camouflage ability. That's something they gave to Indominus Rex in Jurassic World. Now, they aren't super off, but there are enough things wrong with them to annoy me. And it's mostly because the changes they enacted kind of spit in the face of what a Carnotaurus is believed to have been. It's not just that they look wrong, they do, but these animals wouldn't have been able to operate the way prehistoric Carnotaurs probably would have. They're too big, for example, by nearly 10 feet. Although Disney's portrayal of them already screwed that up too, so what the heck. And they had pronated wrists because, I'm getting sick of saying that. Honestly, it'd be easier for me to point out all the species that don't have that, which is basically none of them if they walk on 2 legs. But in any event, their faces are also pretty shrink-wrapped, and they gave them spikes on their heads. Now, you may be saying, well, didn't they? Well, not exactly. They were rounded osteoderms, not outright spikes. And their arms are also too big, which is really irritating, because outside of the horns on the head, their nearly non-existent arms are one of their defining characteristics. They upscaled them for the movie, gave them claws on all 4 of their fingers rather than just 3, and they were slower, which really drives me nuts, because speed was probably the biggest advantage of actual Carnotaurus. They were probably pretty fast. They were built for it, in fact, quite literally. But these clones are very robust in general, with very wide heads, again, not really being accurate. So it's kind of frustrating because they had the chance to make a really unique theropod that operates in a very distinctive way, and yet they did exactly what Disney did and basically just made them a slightly smaller T-Rex. Like, that's really what they did, and it's just like, you already have a T-Rex, though! You don't need more than one of those! Like, why are you like this? Sinoceratops. Or some people call it Sinoceratops. I've always said Sin. You feel free to yell at me in the comments, because you're going to do that anyway. It was neat to see this animal, purely because it's a unique ceratopsian, with a pretty distinctive appearance, and, well, it's not just Triceratops again. And their exact design in the movie is squarely in the middle of the road. Like, they're not super wrong, but they're not super right either. Overall, they look very, very good in general. Like, they're pretty close. Though, the clones have their fenestrae exposed, which is a trait that not a single ceratopsian possessed, let alone Sinoceratops. Their frills were a little bit taller, and the animals in general were larger than the originals. These creatures stand at nearly 27 feet, whereas the originals were more like 20 feet. They also have a dew claw on their back legs, and there's no basis for that. And there's 2 spikes in the center of the frill, which is actually a trait that's more like Pachyrhinosaurus. I don't know why they added that. Though, interestingly, that one specific random nitpicky issue actually has an in-universe explanation for it. See, in canon, the genome for Sinoceratops was actually recreated using an amalgam of ceratopsian DNA. It wasn't just taken straight from the animal. And one of the DNA strands that was sampled was Pachyrhinosaurus. So one could argue that this is simply a leftover from the hodgepodge of DNA they utilized to create the things in the first place. It's, always nice when they do that. They bother to explain these little itty-bitty issues. Because many have pointed this out, and you're right. Technically speaking, every single dinosaur in the Jurassic Park series, unless it's stated otherwise, is a hybrid. Because right from the start, Dr. Wu had to use frog DNA to fill in the gene sequence gaps, because the DNA was fragmentary. And in this instance, they straight up admit that the reason why they have certain traits is because they aren't pure. The clones had to sample some DNA from other similar species in order to make them work. So it's just a neat bit of trivia, honestly. I just really like it when the writers actually make an attempt to explain this kind of stuff, you know? Allosaurus. Man, if there was a dinosaur that everyone was begging them to put in the series and they just didn't for the longest time, it'd be Allosaurus. I mean, they appeared in a lot of spin-off material like video games and stuff, but never actually in a movie until Fallen Kingdom. But to be fair, they weren't even in the book, so hey. But at the same time, Allosaurus is one of the most famous carnivorous theropods, right next to Tyrannosaurus, and probably the most famous one that's actually from the Jurassic period. Tyrannosaurus was Cretaceous, as most of you probably are already aware. Either way, it was nice to see them, but again, they're not quite right, though I think they're a lot better than most people give them credit for because of a few things that I'm gonna point out here, obviously, because that's what the whole video is. I don't know why I explained that. Anyway, their heads are a bit too thick, and overall, they're a little bit too big, but not by a lot. And I mean, like, not a lot at all. These clones are said to be 34 feet. The originals maxed out at 32 feet, which, oh no, that margin for error is so wide. I mean, I guess 2 feet in certain contexts is quite a bit of a margin for error, like in engineering, for example. But in this context, I'm not really gonna get too hung up on it, you know? Their crests are also a bit too exaggerated, and they gave them spines that's running down their backs. There's no basis for that, but they probably added that to make them look a little cooler, because whatever. The shrink wrapping also is pretty bad on their skulls, not gonna lie. That's the one thing I noticed about them immediately. And I almost put Sinoceratops over them, but there's one interesting element of the Allosaurs that I need to bring up because it floored me when I finally noticed it. So the wrists of the juveniles are pronated, because of course they are, but the wrists of adult Allosaurus in the series are not pronated. Which, what? Has hell frozen over? There's a theropod in the Jurassic Park series that doesn't have pronated wrists? And yes, the adult Allosaurs don't have them. They're angled more appropriately for the actual animal, which is great. I'm so glad they took the time to do that. They actually took steps to make it a bit more accurate in that regard. But then this raises the question, why are the juveniles still pronated then? That raises all sorts of issues, like, so as they grow, their wrists rearrange themselves? And are more accurate when they're adults? Like, what? Why didn't you just make them both not pronated then? Like, I don't understand. I don't get it. But I gotta give bonus points for the fact that they thought to fix the wrists when they created the Allosaurus. They could have gone with it and just kept that standard forever. Because every theropod's like that in the series, you know? But they said, no. On the adults, we're gonna fix this. And props and fair credit where it is due. Stygimoloch. Stiggy. I love Styggy. She's so cute and angry. But, you know, some people may argue my putting them in the #1 spot on the basis that, this may not even be a real animal. I have a video where I mentioned this already, but Stygimoloch, at least according to Jack Horner, who presented evidence about this, is believed to not actually be its own species. It's believed that this is a juvenile form of Pachycephalosaurus. And I thought about rating them lower because of that, but honestly, even if that is true, you could just simply say this is a baby Pachycephalosaurus and it would still be fine. That's just a naming issue. You could get around that even in canon fairly easily. So I'm not going to knock it too hard for that, and plus that theory is still debated on. It's accepted by a lot of paleontologists, but some still resist it, so because of that I'm like, let's just not even go there right now. In terms of the actual appearance of the animal, they're not bad. They have some issues, but not a lot. The spikes in the head aren't quite right, and their pupils are actually goat-like, which is probably not how they looked. Their torsos are a little too short, their domes are too big, and their tail is too flexible. Also, their wrists are pronated because you fixed the Allosaurus, why couldn't you do it here? But if you notice, a lot of these are very nitpicky, because, yeah, overall, it's really not a bad portrayal of them, and I think this animal is just hysterical. I will never not laugh at Stiggy mowing down a bunch of criminals who were using their ill-gotten gains to purchase endangered species. Like, that was hilarious. Okay? Objectively, easily one of the best parts of the whole movie, let's be real. As opposed to the worst part, which is turn the boat around! Turn the boat around! You can't leave her there! You turn the boat around right now! Why? Why would you do that? And with that, a special thank you goes out to all my apex predators, Dr. Racer78, Metal for Life Guy, and Arthur Roy. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fun farewell.